Good to have you with us this first Sunday morning of May. Sterling Fox with you in studio, joined by Joe Murphy and Brian Brook from Murphy Battista, LLP. And on this particular episode of The Law Show, we're spending a lot of time talking about insurance from the perspective of lawyers, not insurance. These people aren't here to sell you anything. They're here to advise, perhaps, a little free legal advice on a Sunday morning. We do appreciate that, fellas. But when it comes to insurance of any description, usually as consumers, we look for the bargain. We look for the cheapest way out. The low-cost option is usually always where the eye goes first. And both of you, and we'll start with you on this one, Joe Murphy, both of you maintain when purchasing insurance of any description, cheap and the low number is not necessarily the smartest approach, even for a second.
Yeah, Sterling, the key is when you buy insurance, you want to make sure that you're getting the coverage that you need. And the most common scenario I've run into is a 19-year-old kid, an 18-year-old kid gets his first car and realizes that the insurance premium will be less.
Oh, but just staggering for an 18-year-old kid?
Let's put it
grief.
in mom's name,
Sure,
and
sure.
she'll go on as the principal driver, and the insurance will be cheaper. And that's fine until there is an accident, and ICBC is asked to cover some injury claims.
Right.
And they begin investigating and say, well, whose vehicle really was this? And who really is the principal driver? And there was a case like that went to trial, and it was a sports car, a Camaro or a Mustang with a standard transmission. And the mother swore up and down that this was her car, and she was the principal driver. And at trial, the lawyer for ICBC said, Madam, could you show the judge what the shift pattern is on the 5-speed transmission in your car? And she said, what?
Right, right.
She had no idea.
Right, of course.
What he was even talking about,
Right.
much less knowing what the shift pattern
Right.
was, because she had never driven the car.
I was just going to say, you put it in D, and off you go.
But, it's a disaster, because then the mother is liable for the damages, and the kid's liable for the damages. It's a disaster. But fortunately with ICBC, when that happens, the victims are still paid.
Right.
And ICBC turns around and says, in that case to the mother and son, you owe us $250,000. And that's a disaster for everyone. For the purpose of saving a few $100s a year, they're looking at a huge debt.
But, Brian, this is something that gets done all the time. The kid gets his or her first car, and it goes in dad's name. And, the insurance, the difference in insurance is thousands. So it's easy to understand why the cheaper route is taken.
Yep.
But, man, there's a lot of liability out there all of a sudden.
No, absolutely. You have Jim and Jane, and Jim's got 4 or 5 speeding tickets in the last year, and his rates go way up. And they insure both vehicles under James' name as the principal operator.
Right.
That's all great until Jim gets in another accident, and they realize that he was never the principal operator, or that Jane was mistakenly or misrepresented to be the principal operator from the get-go.
Exactly.
And there's no coverage there.
Right.
Or somebody who moves from Alberta to BC and continues to drive their vehicle with Alberta plates because it's cheaper for 2 or 3 years. You might be saving yourself $100 a year, but if you injure somebody badly as a result of an accident, you're not going to get any coverage because the Alberta insurer is likely going to say, forget it.
Right. And Joe, the example that I was referring to just before we took the break, where there's a clause, a very standard insurance clause in British Columbia that allows for people who are to drive your vehicle who have less than 10 years driving experience, normally referring to younger drivers. Well, if you're past a certain point in your life where the younger drivers in your life have moved on, and then there's another round of nieces or grandchildren or nephews or whatever, you don't have that clause on your car anymore. You've just been driving, the two of you, by yourself for a few years now. So somebody comes along and wants to borrow your car that has less than 10 years driving experience, specifically excluded from your coverage. So then are you in some kind of trouble if that person gets into an accident?
Oh, definitely. The key is understanding what your coverage is. The most common restriction is you don't drive the car more than 10 or 15 kilometers
That's right. To
to
and
work
from
or to
work.
school,
That's right. Yep.
or you only drive to and from work 3 days a month. Those are rules, and if you break the rules and you have an accident, you're at risk of losing your coverage, and it's a disaster for everybody, all for the sake of saving what turns out to be a fairly small sum of money.
Right. And the cars, if you loan your car to now, if you loan your car to a person who is of equal driving experience, is that person covered by your car vehicle owner's insurance?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So where does the coverage break down, Brian? If in that transfer of vehicle, can I borrow your car? Yeah, sure, no problem. Where am I at risk by giving my keys to that person?
If you're giving your keys to somebody who's had a few drinks and you know it,
obviously, yeah.
you're going to be putting yourself at risk. If you give your keys to somebody who doesn't have a valid driver's license or isn't qualified to drive that car without an adult present, a new driver or something,
right,
you're putting yourself at risk. If you give your keys to somebody you know to be an idiot behind the wheel and to have driven like an idiot repeatedly in the past, you may be putting yourself at risk as well. I mean, you've got a responsibility as the owner of a vehicle, not only to yourself and make sure that you're going to be covered by insurance if somebody does something stupid with your vehicle, but you've also got a responsibility to the other motoring public out there, all the pedestrians and other drivers on the roadways. To try to control and minimize, to the extent you're able to, the chances that something bad is going to happen to someone.
Right.
And at the same rationale between, not giving your keys and lending your car to somebody who's obviously been drinking applies to not lending your new Camaro or your Ferrari to a 16-year-old kid who is trying to break the sound barrier first opportunity he gets.
Absolutely, right. So I wanted to talk about another type of insurance, again, from a legal perspective, gentlemen, and that's travel insurance. And I'm a pretty conscientious Canadian traveler. I've been all over the world, and I never, ever leave the country without going to BCAA or one of those outfits and purchasing travel insurance for whatever period of time I'm away from Canada. Am I spinning my wheels, Joe Murphy, or am I actually paying for a product that is going to back me up if I get into a jam some faraway place?
Sterling, the decision to buy the insurance is very wise. The problem is the cheaper the insurance, the less the coverage. And the standard travel insurance said, we cover you while you're traveling for anything new that happens to you. So the question is, if something happens to you, is that a new health problem or is that an old health problem?
Oh.
So if you go and have a heart attack and you had previously seen your doctor for chest pain or shortness of breath, they may say, well, this isn't a new problem, this is an old problem. So there's a real issue of coverage, because the larger the claim, and if you travel in the States, the healthcare costs can be huge.
Sure, yeah.
The larger the claim, the more careful the insurer is going to be to make sure that this was a new health problem, not an old. Insurers generally love to get paid premiums because that's how they make money.
You bet.
And they hate having to pay out money on claims. So there's sort of a split personality there. But cheaper policies provide lower coverage. And the details are really in the small print that almost no one reads. So really it's a matter of having the insurance agent provide the best coverage or provide them with choices, but make sure they know. But that's the biggest problem is this an old health problem or a new problem? Because most policies cover the new problems, but they don't cover old problems.
And the American point of reference for that would be something like a pre-existing condition then, wouldn't it?
Pre-existing condition, and even if someone hasn't been diagnosed with it, if the medical records show that this was a pre-existing condition, they're stuck.
So Brian, Joe says I'm a smart guy for wanting to buy insurance, and I do, religiously. Every time I leave Canada, even if I'm going to a ball game to the Mariners down in Seattle, I buy a one-day thing. But I guess maybe I'm not buying the right coverage. How do I know what is and what isn't good for me?
I struggle with the same thing. I have life insurance. I have disability coverage. I've got homeowners coverage. I've got a vehicle at home. with vehicle coverage, it's pretty straightforward.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, I think you just really have to educate yourself, do some research, talk to other people in the industry. Happily, I've got 12 other lawyers that I can pick the brains of.
Well, that's true.
To figure out what is a good buy and what isn't a good buy. Most people walking around don't really have the same resources like that I enjoy. All I can suggest is do your research, check out the actual written terms of the policy if you've got any question about whether or not it's the right fit or the right buy for you.
Right.
And just be selective.
Is there any kind of checklist that I should be referred to when I'm should the broker, for example, when you're buying life insurance, you sit down and they ask you all these questions about your past and your health and all of this sort of thing. When I buy travel insurance, you stop into the office, it's done in 5 minutes or less, and there's not a very exhaustive process.
They don't care about your prior health problems, but their policy doesn't cover any prior health problems that turn into a bigger problem during the trip. If I'm a consumer, Sterling, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my insurance agent.
Okay.
And I'm going to say, I'm going to California for a week and I want to buy travel insurance. Tell me what my choices are. And then you let the insurance agent do their job, which says, okay, you've got this policy, it's $80. You got this policy, it's $100, but here's what it provides additionally, or this policy that's $110. I would rely on the insurance agent to explain the choices to me and the difference in those choices and use that to make the decision.
But the key, and this is where I'm learning now, because I usually just go to the same place. I go to BCAA, for crying out loud. They're pretty upfront, and they've been around forever, and it's a pretty good outfit. And I'm a member, so I get a bit of a discount. So, but I don't ever think to go somewhere where an insurance pro can be challenged to find me the best coverage wherever I'm going.
But I think when you go to BCAA, you should ask them, you should say, this is what I want or need. Tell me what my choices are in terms of coverage.
Oh, okay. I usually just say I'm going to wherever, and they just issue the standard travel documents, whatever they may be. Need to take a quick break here. Joe Murphy and Brian Brook in studio from Murphy Battista, LLP. This is The Law Show on AM 650, and we're back with more right after this.